Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be, I need some space. Well, that's never a good thing to hear from a woman that you're dating when you think everything's going along just peachy. Well, I've got an email here from a viewer who got that on a couple of different occasions from a woman that he was dating. And so what we're going to look at in this email, because obviously some of his behavior is obviously coming off as being needy, a little stalkerish. But what I'm also seeing from what the woman is doing, it's making me think that she's a little emotionally unstable, or she might be a little bit of a nut. She might be a little wacky. I had a girl I dated years ago, and I became pretty good friends with one of her brothers, and we were chatting one time, and he knows his sister really well. Obviously, he was her big brother, and I remember one time he said, looked at me just like this. I remember like it was yesterday, and he's a cop, and he says, "She's a little wacky," and she was. It was a wild ride, I'll tell you. But obviously, you know, relationships like that can be really great with those kind of women, but they also can really suck. In other words, when they're great, and when they're bad, they really suck. So I can definitely feel for this guy and what he's going through. So before we get into it, I got a quote I'd like to share with you that I wrote. And it says, "Usually when someone you are dating says that they need some space, it's because they are starting to feel smothered by you and that they are losing their freedom. This causes them to feel like you are attached to the idea of being with them as the source of your happiness, instead of loving them unconditionally and sharing your completeness with them as an equal. They go from feeling loved by you to feeling like you are trying to possess and control them. Give those you love the space to choose you or leave you. If they leave you, they were never yours anyway. True love is two people mutually wanting each other out of desire, not a need to possess or control." So let's jump right into this guy's email. He says, "Hey Corey, great stuff on your website, and I also bought your book. So here's the deal. I dated a woman for 5 months. We both claimed best compatibility either of us had ever experienced. Intellectually, sexually, temperament, sense of humor, goals, professions, etc. It's nice when you click with somebody like that on that kind of level, because everything is really awesome. And that kind of a relationship, the emotions obviously are going to be really intense too. But when things go sideways, it's like a kick in the nuts that you weren't expecting. Or kind of like, I remember when I played football in high school, we wore cups back then. And the coach would, every once in a while, he'd get a broomstick out of the closet and come out on the field when you were least expecting it to check and see if you were wearing your cup. And he'd walk up behind you and whack, you know, right between your legs. And if you forgot to wear your cup or you weren't wearing it, you were on the ground rolling around. This guy was old school. He actually used to be a coaching assistant with the Dallas Cowboys. I think it was in the 1970s, and he was a hell of a high school coach, but he was a fucking character. He says, "We went on several trips together, and we met each other's parents and families, and every date together was a lot of fun." And he says, as a sidebar, she's got a 17-year-old son who has been in rehab boarding school since this past year for drug problems. He's been away and not in the picture for the first 5 months. And at the end of June, she starts to go visit him periodically, and she would leave on a Friday. She texts me from the airport telling me how much she loved me, how much she appreciated me, was glad that I was in her life. And he says she gets back on Sunday, and I text to see if she's back. No response. Monday, no response. So I send an email to see what's up, because it's not like her to not communicate. Obviously that is kind of weird, but when you leave a message for a woman and then you don't wait for her to get back to you, that can come off as being needy. But I can also understand if you've been with this woman for 5 months and you had that kind of a deep connection, and then all of a sudden she's just completely ignoring you, you're going to be wondering if she got hit by a bus or something. So it's understandable. He says, then I get an email saying I need some space. And he says, I was like, what the fuck? He says, I kept my cool and I met with her to talk. She didn't give me a reason, really. Just that she needed some space to reconnect with herself, and I gave it to her. I didn't call, text, or email for 3 weeks. That's pretty odd to go from hot and heavy to all of a sudden it took her 3 weeks to get back in touch with you. He says, then at the end of 3 weeks, she pops back up and invites me to dinner. Well, one of two things is going on here. Either she's a whack job, or you had been pursuing her a little too much, or maybe smothering her, and this was this behavior. Because when I get emails from guys, a lot of times they tend to sugarcoat their behavior. They try to make themselves look good. And so what I, as a coach, look at is I look at what are the actions. What's she doing? What's she saying? What is he doing? And what is he saying? And I can read between the lines between that. He says, we went out, we had a great time as always. We fooled around a little, but no sex. I see her the next week, same thing, great time together. And at this point, I'm letting her initiate all contact. She was texting me at the end of the day to see how I am and asking me out, etc. Well, that's definitely a good sign. Women who exhibit signs like this, that they're all hot and heavy, and then the next moment they're not making any effort, that's classic passive-aggressive type tendencies. And this ex-girlfriend that I mentioned, whose brother said she's a little wacky, back when I was dating her, she was definitely a passive-aggressive woman. And the thing that's really hard about dating somebody like that is that things are going along great, and then all of a sudden they just stop communicating. And that really sucks when that happens, especially when you're totally in love with that person. And all of a sudden they just stop making any kind of effort at all. And then I know what it's like. You go 3 weeks, you're like, what the fuck? And then you just got to wait until she comes back to you. He says in mid-August, her son he comes home and he visits for a week. And he says, I didn't expect to see her that week because he was obviously visiting with her and she probably wanted to spend time with that. He says that was fine with me. And he says she set up a couple of meetings for us for a drink while her son was with friends for a couple of hours. He says, all good stuff. She's telling me she loves me and how special I am and thanking me for not giving up on her, etc. God, I've heard shit like that before. He says, so during the visit, the kid fucks up and he ends up ODing. He's not supposed to do that stuff, so she freaks out and calls me over to support her. He says, so I did that, and I spent the weekend with them doing things. So all that put her back to the emotions that she had when her kid was having troubles. So the kid leaves and goes back to school. And then we go back to seeing each other once a week, and she's still texting me, telling me I'm hot and wonderful and blah, blah, blah. When she reaches out to you, you should be making dates to see her again and not chit-chatting on the phone, especially after you went through that 3-week period of just not hearing from her. He says, we had seen each other Friday and then Saturday or Sunday for a brunch, and then I went back to her place after brunch and we hung out and talked. I could tell she was distant. She made a comment that you need a girlfriend without a 17-year-old kid who's got drug problems, basically. And that can mean a couple of things. That can mean she wants to see how you're responding to that, such as I'm not good enough for you, or she's trying to fish around and see how you really feel about her. Or deep down, she's lost interest in you and her attraction level has dropped and she's trying to break up with you gracefully, because I think you did say that doesn't sound like you'd been having sex when she came back. You more or less were hanging out, but no sex was happening. He says, I replied, what, are you trying to get rid of me? Well, that's definitely not a confident statement. And so when she says something like that, you know, that you need a girlfriend without basically all the drama with her family members. And I would say something funny or humorous, like, well, I can always get out my old black book and call up some of my old girlfriends, and you know, maybe I can get a couple of them together, and you and we can have a threesome together, and be playful with it like that. He says, so after he said, are you trying to get rid of me? She said no. He says, so then I texted her Monday to say hello, and nothing. And you shouldn't be texting her these BS things. Remember, the phone is for setting dates. And so when a woman says something like that, and then the very next day you text her to say hello and she just ignores you, that leads me to believe that she's basically trying to ditch you again or trying to break up with her, or get you to break up with her. So he says, on Wednesday, I called to see if she wanted to have dinner. And at this point, you should have just waited to hear from her instead of continuing to go back to pursuing her. And so he obviously leaves a message. She doesn't call him back. And then he says, so I texted Friday again and nothing. Yeah, now you're acting really needy. And so what I'm starting to think is this is kind of how your behavior has always been. And this stuff, this issue with her son, was just kind of like the emotional trigger to realize for her that you just weren't the strong man that she thought you were. And then so she starts to back off because she's feeling that you're acting weak with this kind of needy behavior. And then what happens is you start chasing, you start pursuing him. This is the third time you reached out to her and she's completely ignored you. He says, I finally sent an email asking what was going on with the silent treatment. So now it's 4 times you've reached out to her, and then obviously she didn't respond to that either. So he says, I'm cool with a girl needing space, especially someone dealing with emotional stuff, and I don't know why she just can't say that. Well, she actually did, but your behavior also communicates that you just continue to pursue her. And when a woman backs away like that, if you've actually read my book, you know just to wait. Maybe she's busy, maybe she's dealing with a difficult time, maybe she's talking with her ex-husband about it, or whoever the father of the kid is. And you just figure she'll get back to you when she gets back to you. To continue to pursue like that, you're not helping yourself. Or she could also text back and say, hey, I'm not ready for a relationship right now. He says, I just want the truth. And that tells me that you're focused solely on trying to determine where you stand with this woman. And so if you're asking that, or if you're trying to focus on that, it tells me you don't really know where you stand. You don't know what's going on. And that is definitely needy behavior. And if you've been with this woman for 5 months, more than likely you've probably over-pursued her pretty much through most of the relationship. And if I was doing a phone session with you, one of the questions that I would ask you is, over the course of this 5 months, what percentage of calling, texting, and pursuing were you initiating, and what percentage was she initiating? And any time that I'm talking to a guy doing a phone session, and he tells me that he's doing more than 20 to 30%, like if he's doing 40% or 50% or more, you get the exact opposite effect. The woman will slowly lose interest over time because you're just pursuing too much. In essence, you're acting like a woman. He says, we're both 50, and this woman is a doctor, and so you'd think that she'd be able to have a conversation with me about this shit since I've been there to help her. Yeah, it would make sense, but at the end of the day, what are her actions? Her actions are she's just blowing you off. That tells me that she doesn't really give a shit. Remember, she went, if you were really that important to her, she wouldn't have wanted to go 3 weeks without talking. So it's only like after 3 weeks she realized, well, maybe this guy's really great, maybe I should call him, give him another chance. And then so she starts going back out with you, and then you kind of go right back to the over-pursuing type of behavior instead of letting her come to you. Because on one hand, you said you're letting her do all the pursuing, but you're also telling me that you're sending her text just to see how she's doing. And so what you're telling me is not really adding up here. And like I said, a lot of guys, they try to sugarcoat what they're really doing because they don't want to admit that they've been fucking up. And like I said, that's why I can look through your whole email here, and it's like you're not really being congruent with what you're telling me. On one hand, you're saying you're doing one thing, and then another, in the next sentence, you're telling me that you're doing the exact opposite of that. He says, at this point, I'm not communicating with her at all. I know that chasing will only make it worse. That is absolutely correct, and good job for realizing that. He says, unless she's a complete nut, it's totally possible she may be a whack job, and this has just brought it about. But I also think from what you shared with me is that there's a really good chance that you, throughout these past 5-6 months that you were together with her, you've pursued too much. And like I said, with all the emotions that were brought up because of the stuff going on with her son, in essence having a drug relapse, that's why instead of pulling you closer and leaning on you as her source of masculine strength, she actually pushed you away. He says, we both felt a special connection. Again, that was in the past. You always look at what women do in the present, because guys tend to look at, what they did 4 months ago. It's irrelevant to a woman. The only thing that matters is right now. The only thing that matters is what she's feeling today. He says, so this behavior makes no sense to me. What do you have to say about that? And like I was saying earlier, it's like from what I see here in your email, it definitely looks like you've pursued this girl too much, and it's probably been going on throughout the relationship. She could be a little wacky as well, and that's definitely not helping the situation. And at this point, the only thing that you can do is wait to hear from her. And if she reaches out to you, just make a date. Have her come on over to your place. Tell her to bring a bottle of wine or something, whatever it is you guys normally drink when you're together. And make dinner together and talk to her and just say, look, if we're going to continue to see each other, this just blowing me off and ignoring me, that's rude and it's immature. You're acting like a kindergartner. I want to have a relationship with somebody that knows how to communicate like an adult, because the way you've been acting is dysfunctional. And if that's the way you are, I'm not interested in continuing. So if we're going to continue to see each other, you need to act like an adult. You need to be respectful and appreciative of my time. You tell me that you love me and you care about me, and then you just blow me off and ignore me for a few days. That tells me that's somebody that doesn't know how to communicate very well. And if you can't communicate very well, it's never going to work, and I'd rather just us part ways, and you go your way and I'll go mine, and we'll say, hey, we had a great 5-6 months together, and it's been great. But if you're going to promise me that you're never going to do this again, and if something's bothering you, something's upsetting you, that you're going to communicate to me and tell me exactly what's going on in your mind, because I'm not a mind reader and I'm not psychic. I need you to tell me exactly what you're feeling and exactly what you're thinking if we're going to have any chance at making this work, because this is not a lot of fun. I really care about you too, and then you just all of a sudden stop calling me. It makes me think that you got hit by a bus or something like that. It makes me worry about you. Because, I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's not a woman that you just met and went out a couple of times. You've been with her for 5-6 months at this point. So, like I said, if she does come back, if she does call you, you gotta look at it from the perspective of you're restarting the courtship, and assume that her attraction level has dropped for you to the point where, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's maybe a 5. In other words, you're like just barely hanging on, and so you've got to go right back. Just instead of calling her and reaching out to her, let her come to you. Let her call you. Let her text you. And when she does those things, be a man. Don't send 15, 20 messages back and forth or 15 or 20 emails back and forth before you get around to asking her out. Just get right to the point. If she sends you a text and says, hey, good morning, how are you? Hey, babe, great to hear from you. I'd love to see you. When are you free to get together? Let her tell you when she's free to get together. Make a definite date and then say, hey, great, I can't wait to see you on such and such day. I got to run. I'll see you then. And then get off the phone. Even if she wants to chit-chat, just say, I can't talk right now, but I can give you my undivided attention when we have dinner tomorrow night or Wednesday or next week or whenever the hell it happens to be. And from this point forward, you need to keep your phone conversations to having one single purpose, and that is making dates. Because when you talk on the phone too much, you end up becoming like the gay male girlfriend or the emotional tampon, and you just never get anywhere with it. And obviously, I know I've been in this situation with women like this when I was younger, and it's not a lot of fun, especially when you really care about a girl. And so that's the best way that you can handle the situation and potentially turn around. Now, if you do everything right and you let her come to you, and she's doing 70 to 80% of the pursuing, and then all of a sudden she just stops moving forward completely like that again, then I would say, yeah, definitely, she's a fucking wacko, she's a nut, passive-aggressive, and if that happens, then I would say, hey, you're a great girl, and I really enjoyed our time together, but this is just not working for me, and at this point, I don't think we should see each other again, and I wish you all the best luck in your search, but I need to find somebody who can treat me good, because I don't like the way you treat me, and this is the third time this has happened, and I'm over it. It's been real. Have a nice life. And that's how I would handle it. That's the only thing you can do, because you can't fix that. If it turns out that that's the way she is, you deserve to have somebody who's got their shit together and is not a fucking Fruit Loop. So if you'd like to get my help personally, the quickest way to get my help is to book a paid phone coaching session, or book you can purchase email coaching as well by going to my website and click the products tab at the top of your screen and just follow the instructions. And I will talk to you soon.